This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story.
Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. This week, Robert and Alida are continuing their conversation with Molly McCloy. They're picking up right where they left off, talking all about the craft of oral storytelling.
Well, let's talk about some of the craft that goes into your stories, because Robert has already brought us into that subject matter and, calling back to things or coming, circling back onto them in that story. I noticed several places throughout your stories, but in that one, there was one where, you had been robbed, and so then you got a new TV and you painted splotches of paint on it. So if you were robbed again, you could jump out and say, try selling that, right? And later on, while you're camping, your roommate looks at you like you had just painted the TV again. And so there are these lines where you just sort of reference back to things so beautifully, and so the opening hook also that, Robert mentioned you open in action in media res. Can you talk about coming up with that opening sentence? I've noticed with really good moth stories, it's so critical that you hook your reader right away. It's critical in any short story, but especially it seems like, these oral tellings, you have to get something big, something really intriguing out there.
Yeah. I would say I don't always get it right.
Who does? Right.
Yeah, they do tell you over and over to start in the story, and it's one of the judging criteria. So,
okay.
Yeah. So they kind of put that up front for you, and they do give you a little bit of craft advice on their website, and it's got that some other things. And I guess I try to open with something that has some questions to it to be answered. Why is this person at a campground with naked people? How did she get here? And then I go back. And so instead of starting with my house got burglarized, leading up like a start, here I am, naked people camping. People were like, what are you doing there? And I go, well, my house got burglarized. And then I kind of lead back up to it, Yeah.
Yes.
So
and the audience goes, what does a burglary have to do with naked camping people, right? And then you have to listen to see how we go from here to here, back to here.
And I guess back over there, just the general, the old essay thing of a question, right? Trying to think of other stories.
You do them nested though, which I also really admire. I love nested stories. So how do you, and you work them with flashbacks too. So do you when you first drafting that first, dump it all out, does it come out linearly and then you restructure and you think, oh, I need to flash back to, when the house got robbed and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that story was really long when I first wrote it. It had to be cut to like a quarter of the length of the original because there was a whole side story about having a straight guy roommate at the time that everybody thought was my boyfriend when we were camping, and because everything was sort of so dangerous and weird at our house after we'd been robbed that I did kind of have this attraction to him at some point too. So there was all that stuff that it just was not going to fit into like a 5-minute story. Am I answering the question? What was the question again?
Well, you've nested stories in there when it's come out as the final crafted version, and some of that is flashback to what happened. But as you say, you don't tell it in a linear fashion. So when you first dump it all out in your first draft, is it coming out linearly as well, or does your mind sort of think, oh, I need to tell them about this bit here? And how does that work?
I think it's pretty linear. It's linear with lots of digressions, right? Lots of different branches off to other things that eventually have to get kind of put under control.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway for listeners to hear you talk about this, because you can do the dump. You can get it all on paper. and then you can shape it and you can prune it and you can work it into those 5 minutes. Because if we start thinking, I have to tell a 5-minute story, then, it's like you're being strangled and you can't, can't get anything out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point. It's just like give yourself that freedom and that expansiveness in the beginning when you're not having to stand up and do that for the 5 minutes, right? Give yourself a chance to spread out so that you see what you actually have before you're picking and choosing what you're going to put in there,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you said that effectively you cut 75% out of that. If you tell any novelist, that I'm your editor and I'm going to make you cut 75% of your novel, they probably give up at that point. So that's it.
Yeah. Well, the storytelling has really helped me with revision. Because I've become so cutthroat about it, so ruthless about cutting my own stuff and reapplying and reusing stuff. Yes. So it's just like I'm not really upset if somebody tells me I have to change something anymore. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, I'm changing this stuff like all the time.
Right. Nice.
Yeah. And then recycling it, right? So it's never dead necessarily, right? I mean,
and then hopefully eventually find the best format for it, So
yes, yeah.
Do you keep? It sounds like you do keep a journal of moments or half-formed stories, or how do you capture your material and keep it without forgetting it? I've forgotten most of my life. This is why I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, and then I fill in some blanks, just kind of guessing on something. Well, I do have a book manuscript now, so that helps. I sat down and just I did the one-woman show, which was interesting, and then I decided, okay, well, I don't have enough pages for a full book, so what I'll do is just sit down and tell all the related stories from the time periods. And then eventually, and then I have too much. I have 130,000 words or whatever. So now what I'm doing is, if I get, if I want to go compete in a Moss Slam, or if I want to do a storytelling show in town that's not competitive, I've got the manuscript to pull from. So I'll grab a story out of it,
Mm-hmm.
That makes it easier. And then I've been writing stuff down for so long, which is great because then I can find these old details that I forgot. So
That's awesome. So another craft thing I noticed in your storytelling is you will explain the obvious. It's part of your deadpan humor. And like you said, there was a guy camping who you dubbed the negative gnome. And you said because he looked like a gnome and he was really negative, and that got a big laugh. And so is that a style choice? What does it take to pull it off? Is it like, how do you choose what makes a punchline as you're writing? And is that only something that works in oral storytelling where you can deliver it with your pauses and your inflection, and you're reading the room and everything too?
God, the crazy things about punchlines is sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, depending on the audience. Sometimes, and then I would get up and do a story and a line that I didn't even think was funny would get a laugh. And I'd be like, oh, I guess it's a funny line. And then I would go do it for a completely different audience, and then it wouldn't get a laugh. So there's this weird sort of subjective things that happens with the punchlines too, where I'm not even sure if they're going to land, That particular one, because it looked like he was a gnome, and I guess I was just kind of making fun of myself for giving him such an obvious name,
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where that one really came from. And then, are there more observational ones like that? Like I try to start out with like a medium level joke, like not necessarily, well, it's impossible to kind of have your best joke because you don't really have the context built up yet anyway. So, but I try to start off with one that's like, okay, if they laugh at this one, which is okay, then they're going to really laugh when I get quarters of the way through. And then I'm feeling good, I'm doing it. But then, and this has happened, if they don't laugh at that one, then, I'm getting better at dealing with that. But that's stumped me a few times too. So.
Yeah, if they don't laugh at something where you expect them to laugh, then is it all downhill from there? Or can you recover?
It was, okay, well, I did recover, so that feels good. But yeah, I had a really hard moth Grand Slam in Brooklyn in 2015 where these jokes that I had told about my brother's joking about how marijuana will turn a guy into a girl. They have they had these set of sort of like self-righteous anti-pot smoker jokes when they got sober themselves. That's basically what was going on. And this one joke that had killed at the Lambda Literary Retreat, like here I am in front of like, I don't know, probably 650 people at the Moth Grand Slam. Nobody laughed. And it just threw me because I was like, oh my God, I thought this was a sure thing. And I stepped back from the mic and I said, oh no. And some people thought, oh no, was part of the story. And I completely blanked out. I didn't know where I was in the story anymore because I was like, oh my God, here I'm in front of all these people and they didn't laugh at my opening joke. What am I going to do? It wasn't the opening joke, but it was kind of in there. But then I came back with a joke that really worked after that, and then at least was able to finish the story, even though, and it salvaged it somewhat. Didn't go running, crying off the stage, which is what I felt like doing at first. I mean, I was just like, oh no, where am I? Who am I? What's my name? Who are all these people? How did I get here? I was completely drawing a blank, and it, I'm sure it was a matter of seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes, Doesn't
it? Yeah. Everything freezes up. And,
everything's just like,
time stops.
Oh my gosh.
that was crazy. That was the one thing that made me feel better about that is that around the same time, I think it was Serena Williams had a choke at the Grand Slam. So these things were coming on the radio, and it was also called the Grand Slam, and it was about how Serena had some trouble playing tennis, and I was like, oh, okay, she's a great tennis player. And then started talking to my friends that were performers, and everybody's got a story. So, but that's that dependence on that audience feedback could be a tricky thing, and I don't know how else to get around responding to people not laughing at your jokes except for doing it over and over again and getting used to being on stage more. I think I'm a lot better at it than I used to be.
Right.
When I used to open up when I taught presentation skills with the idea that people think it's about being perfectly polished on stage. And I said, the biggest skill you can possibly learn is the skill of recovery, because that teaches you to play with your audience, because as you say, they don't always respond. And it can be unpredictable. As you say, you tell a joke that's worked 9 times out of the last 10, and then the 10th that just falls flat. You think, why did that happen? And the trick is not to be popped out for too long, but just recover in some way, shape or form. So your recovery skill set, I think, is just as important. And most of us develop it on the fly because it's not formally taught. But if you drill down, there are things you can do neurologically that will get you back to your rapport with the audience and, who you are, especially like you've got themes and you've got things to call back to. So, and these are stories that you've lived as well. So you've got things to call on, probably deeply unconscious, that are helping you find your way back, and having the strength to stand there and just continue as well.
That would be tough. Have you seen anyone just leave the stage, just get so flustered that they can't recover?
It doesn't happen very often, but I have seen that, and I understand that impulse really well, and I feel for those people.
Yes. Oh my gosh, definitely. Wow.
From the point of view of the audience, what do you think makes a really good short, whether it's Moth or something else, but a 5 to 6 minute entertaining story? What is it? What do you think the audience respond to?
I think that's a good question. I think it's good to limit the time frame of the story.
Yeah.
I think that's something that people forget. Like, if you want to tell about years of your life, 5-minute story, if you can do it right, if you're very, very skilled and you've been doing it for a long time, maybe you can do it. But picking an event that takes place in a few days, like limiting your time frame, like because then then you have events in your story. You actually have some things happening. People, at the very least, I get accused of not having a whole lot of action in my stories, but at the very least, I have people talking to each other in real time,
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can set a scene, I think people want to feel like they're there, and set a scene. And then it's a matter of conflict and problem, working out some, I've seen some of these sort of danger in nature and going snowblind on a mountain stories kind of work pretty well because, people understand the fear and the danger stakes, are important. People like, I kind of have a problem with that. I tend to be funny instead of having I tend to have kind of emotional stakes that I really have to sort of highlight. But, I'm trying to think of my friend Adam Wade does really well, and making yourself a character, because he has sort of this character of, he's kind of that shy, nerdy part that of people that everybody has in themselves and that everybody can identify with, and you end up just rooting for him because he's just trying to do, he's got stories of being a high school student, trying to ask out a girl or whatever, he's got like just those that sort of making yourself into a character that people can identify and having conflicts that people can identify with kind of puts people on your side. I think humility, for some reason, in personal storytelling tends to do a lot better than overconfidence or arrogance. It tends to be a really good place for the understated and the humble, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's something about them being true stories that somebody's getting up by themselves and telling it to you.
Maybe it's also something that's easier for an audience member to position shift into to live vicariously. Whereas when it's someone who's confident and has an unbruisable ego, then it might be well, that's just them, Whereas you see somebody up on stage being vulnerable or humble, then there's something we can identify with. So maybe it's the identification factor. Who knows?
Yeah, it might be a piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some stakes, some good conflict.
Yeah.
Knowing what the protagonist of the story wants, trying to find out whether they're going to get it or not. That tends to help. Having some question that gets answered, being able to follow that, or
Now, something that novels and talks share, storytelling talks share, is needing a good ending. So, what do you think? What are some of the keys to that?
God, endings are so hard.
I know.
I just feel like you could have a good story that's going to win a Moth Slam and still not have a good ending, And for me, a lot of times, I finally get some ending line that works, and I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to explain to you why they work, because I know that's the question. But I'll write it on the way to the store, or on the way to the slam, or while other people are telling their stories, I'll suddenly get the idea for it. Sort of like, and the piece that I just published on Blue Mesa Review, people have complimented the last line on that. That was just random, that it wasn't sent out that way originally. It got edited, and then I wanted to work with them on the way they edited the end. So am I just copping out on this answer? I think.
Well, you mentioned theme. You said the theme really helped you stick the ending. The moth theme. So, I mean, how in short stories, well, in novels and anything, I always feel like the last words have to resonate with the reader. You want the reader to get past that period at the end of the sentence and still be like, wow, taking it in. Is it the same with oral storytelling, or is it more like the applause starts and everybody, what effect are you going for with the last line of a oral story?
I'm kind of thinking that the reason, the effect that I'm going for, I'm going to answer the actual question this time. I'm really working on that. Okay. The effect that I'm going for is, I want to avoid like starting some news story or totally throwing a curveball. I'm just so glad to have gotten through the climax part of the story, because if you don't nail that, like, you're really in trouble. And I feel like this is like, oh, okay, we're all happy with each other now. I just, if I just say something, I can get out of here. But hopefully, if it's decent, it'll call back to the theme, because I'm trying to think of how I ended the Camping with the Naked Hippies, and it's, I have the subplot with the dog, which is kind of about getting to that interior story of, like, safety and protection. And so
was it so with that, I made a note because I was going to talk about how you do reversals. So you say to the dog, don't worry, the people at the campground, they're nice people, we're fine, we're safe. And then, like, the next day you say, boy, I really respect my dog's choice in friends. So you reverse that, right? So was that the last line?
No, the last line is my one friend in the utopia, referring to
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So so the dog subplot comes around. I was so disturbed by this burglary. I mean, somebody had been in my house while I was sleeping, and so I was going to put a glass block in a window. I mean, I went kind of nutty, and so I had this dog, and so at the end of the story, it's the realization that I'm going to protect my dog. That like, I've been looking for all these outside sources of protection. Yes. So now, maybe I didn't solve the campground mystery, although I kind of did, but nobody saw it. But the one thing I can do is this dog that I got to be my protector, and it was the first dog I'd ever had. I really was a person before that, and then okay, now I can protect my dog. So you're right; it was kind of a reversal of the theme. Yeah.
Right. You bought the dog to protect you, but then at the end you protect the dog. I love the reversals. I love the way we have to keep shifting our perspective throughout your stories, and everything you think it has this meaning, and then it takes on that meaning as you go through the narrative. That's one of the things I really love about your stories.
Oh, thank you. I think some of it's probably unintentional, but I will
take the credit. Right? It's that sharply honed writer's instinct.
I guess some twist on the theme, some new way of seeing the story, since I spent the whole story trying to get everybody else to protect me, and then kind of more of a sense of self in the end. Maybe ending with the interior conflict is sort of a way to nail the theme at the end of the story, instead of, and, if I just end it with, well, I tried to solve this mystery at the campground and I failed, then it's just a story about a campground, right? And these messed up people. But then if I say at the end, this thing that I was really looking for, which was to feel better and to feel safer, this idea that I could find that in myself, then that's more about the interior conflict of trying to feel better and trying to feel safer. And then that kind of, even if it's not the adventure theme, it kind of gets to the real theme of that story, which I think is safety, probably, and security.
Definitely. Yeah. And that gives the story that resonance at the end where you walk away going, okay, there's more to it than just, ha ha ha, aren't the nudists funny? And wasn't the whodunit scene with the whiteboard at the campground clever and cute? You think, what does it mean to be safe? What does it mean to be protected or to be the protector? Can I find that reserve within? And I think, as an audience member, we take that on kind of subconsciously. So we might not be actively thinking, what does it mean to be safe? But it's there. It's in the subtext. And we do get that. And I think that's the difference between a really rich, enriching story and one that is, kind of fluffy.
Well, thank you. I don't know if I can take credit for all that, but yeah. Well, big shout out to Vivian Gornick for that, right? Situation in the Story is such an incredible text, and she was my teacher at the New School, and that really changed. I think my stories were pretty mechanical and sort of flat up to that point, but then she really gets this idea that the story's got to have an emotional heart to it. It's got to have an emotional question to it. So I guess maybe the short answer is on endings. If you can hit that emotional question in the ending, then you're going to probably have a more satisfying. I'm going to write that down and try to remember it.
I know. Well, we're recording. You can just put it on a loop. Play that. We'll get the audio clip to you.
And I would reflect that too, because as you answered the question or thought about it, and there isn't a mechanical or a logical answer to it, because it comes from a feeling. So the fact that I sat with it, or I wrote the ending on the way because that was when it came to me. It's not really something that you sort of necessarily. I mean, it can work if it just comes out of your head and onto paper. And one of the things that we always used to teach people was that you're ending on some form of kinesthetic, whether it's plus or minus. And so there's some form of gravitas that may be intentional or unintentional depending on how you end. But if you choose not to do that and just to try to be clever, then it's like popcorn, or sugar. It's just a quick sugar hit. But if you go for that feeling or that emotional component, then I think that's the kind of thing that resonates and leaves an audience with a more of a gut punch sometimes as well. Sort of the aha moment. And that to me that can only come emotionally. It doesn't come rationally. It comes when you put puzzle pieces together. So it sounds like that's what you're doing is allowing it over time. So you're not stuck on your ending. You're not sort of saying, right, this has got to be my ending. You're actually letting it sit with you, which is, I think, really good advice. So
yeah, that's interesting. Well, thanks.
Well, do you have any final thoughts about oral storytelling or advice for people who maybe want to get into the moth or into microphone audience situations, whether that's on Zoom or waiting a little while and actually getting up on a stage?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with the Zoom thing myself.
Yeah.
But I would say if we get to a point again where people can get on stage in front of an audience, if we get there anytime soon, to do it, because there's a lot of fear around getting up there. But the storytelling audience is the most friendly and gentle, sort of like they are on your side rooting for you. And so if you're going to do it somewhere, like do it there, and I would also say that it's done nothing but help my writing, especially because of what we've talked about, is just letting go of the preciousness in editing and being able to keep playing with different stories over and over again until I get it right, and just it lets up on the preciousness, which I think is really important. And you'll see comedians that'll go and do a comedy show. I saw, I think it was Anthony Jeselnik, I think was his name, and he went and he just had a list of all of his jokes, tried them out, and either crossed them out because they didn't work or checked them because they did work as he tried it out with people. And I thought, wow, we're getting it all wrong in the literary MFAs.
Yes,
like this is what it's about, is using that preciousness and taking a risk and trying things out and putting yourself out there. And there's nothing you can do but win in some way, I think.
Right. Yeah, I saw David Sedaris come do, a reading, and he reads his new essays. He doesn't read previously published essays, so he reads his essays on his tours that are new, his work in progress essays, and then based on the audience reactions, he refines them or cuts them. So before things appear at your bookstore, he has toured them.
Yeah, he's great for that too. That's right. And it's like, to get this idea that, an audience response is the final word on the quality of your work. Because you're just like, wow, well, let's get out from under the heaviness of that. Everybody's just winging it and trying things out. And then, let's come back to a sense of play and trial and error. Some risk, and some fun. So,
right. Yeah. And as you said, a joke would work great with one audience and bomb with another. So you can't even just take one night's reaction as the final word.
No. And I think we take ourselves too seriously as writers. And I think it's good to have like, it's great for me to go do, I've been doing a little bit of stand-up, is just go do something light, and kind of let go of that idea that, somebody's going to decide whether it's good or not. And you might even quit writing based on that. I got into that for a little while. And it's like, no, this is something that goes on for a long time. You have plenty of room to try things out.
Yes.
Good advice.
Great advice. Well, Molly, thank you so much for being on the show. We are going to link, I think you sent us like 5 of your stories and such. They're all going to be linked in the show notes, so people can find those at storyworkspodcast.com. They can find you at mollymccloy.com. We will link to that as well. And you are going to come back for another episode to talk about the difference crafting narrative essays and crafting oral stories. So we'll go a little more into the writing side of what you do. Thank you.
And leaving it on the writing side as well, I'd highly recommend you go read Fragile Donkey as well. It's hilarious.
Yes, and we will.
Your latest short story, which we'll link to in the note.
Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.